Chapter 20. The Tempting of Larry. We paused before thick curtains, through which came the faint murmur of many voices. They parted. Out came two ushers, I suppose. They were in cuirasses and kilts that reminded me somewhat of chainmail, the first armor of any kind here that I had seen. They held open the folds. The chamber, on whose threshold we stood, was far larger than either anteroom or hall of audience. Not less than 300 feet long and half that in depth. From end to end of it ran two huge semicircular tables, paralleling each other, divided by a wide aisle, and heaped with flowers, with fruits, with vines unknown to me, and glittering with crystal flagons, beakers, goblets of as many hues as the blooms. On the gay cushioned couches that flanked the tables, lounging luxuriously, were scores of the fair-haired ruling class, and there rose a little buzz of admiration, oddly mixed with a half-startled amaze, as their gaze fell upon O'Keefe in all his silvery magnificence. Everywhere the light-giving globes sent their roseate radiance. The cuirassed dwarfs led us through the aisle. Within the arc of the inner half-circle was another glittering board, an oval. But of those seated there, facing us, I had eyes for only one Ulara. She swayed up to greet O'Keefe, and she was like one of those white lily maids, whose beauty Honku, the sage, says made the Gobi first a paradise, and whose lust later the burned-out desert that it is. She held out hands to Larry, and on her face was passion unashamed, unhiding. She was Circe, but Circe conquered. Webs of filmiest white clung to the rose-leaf body. Twisted through the corn silk hair a threaded circlet of pale sapphires shone, but they were pale beside Ulara's eyes. O'Keefe bent, kissed her hands, something more than mere admiration flaming from him. She saw and, smiling, drew him down beside her. It came to me that of all, only these two, Ulara and O'Keefe, were in white, and I wondered. Then with a tightening of nerves ceased to wonder as there entered Luger. He was all in scarlet, and as he strode forward a silence fell, a tense, strained silence. His gaze turned upon Ulara, rested upon O'Keefe, and instantly his face grew dreadful. There is no other word than that for it. Marakanoff leaned forward from the center of the table, near whose end I sat, touched, and whispered to him swiftly. With appalling effort the red dwarf controlled himself. He saluted the priestess ironically, I thought, took his place at the further end of the oval. And now I noted that the figures between were the seven of that council, of which the Shining One's priestess and voice were the heads. The tension relaxed, but did not pass, as though a storm cloud should turn away, but still lurk, threatening. My gaze ran back. This end of the room was draped with the exquisitely colored, graceful curtains looped with gorgeous garlands. Between curtains and table, where sat Larry and the nine, a circular platform, perhaps 10 yards in diameter, raised itself a few feet above the floor, its gleaming surface half covered with the luminous petals, fragrant, delicate. On each side below it were low carven stools. The curtains parted and softly entered girls bearing their flutes, their harps, the curiously emotion-exciting, octaved drums. They sank into their places. They touched their instruments. A faint, languorous measure throbbed through the rosy air. The stage was set. What was to be the play? Now about the tables passed other dusky-haired maids, fair bosoms bare, their scanty kirtles looped high, pouring out the wines for the feasters. My eyes sought O'Keefe. Whatever it had been that Marakanoff had said, clearly it now filled his mind, even to the exclusion of the wondrous woman beside him. His eyes were stern, cold, and now and then, as he turned them toward the Russian, filled with a curious speculation. Ulara watched him, frowned, gave a low order to the Hebe behind her. The girl disappeared, entered again with a ewer that seemed cut of amber. The priestess poured from it into Larry's glass a clear liquid that shook with tiny sparkles of light. She raised the glass to her lips, handed it to him. Half smiling, half abstractedly, he took it, touched his own lips where hers had kissed, drained it. A nod from Ulara, and the maid refilled his goblet. At once there was a swift transformation in the Irishman. His abstraction vanished, the sternness fled, his eyes sparkled. He leaned caressingly toward Ulara, whispered. Her blue eyes flashed triumphantly, her chiming laughter rang. She raised her own glass, but within it was not that clear drink that filled Larry's. And again he drained his own, and, lifting it, full once more, caught the baleful eyes of Luger, and held it toward him mockingly. Yalara swayed, close alluring, tempting. He arose, face all reckless gaiety, rollicking deviltry. "A toast," he cried in English, "to the Shining One, and may the hell where it belongs soon claim it." He had used their own word for their god, all else had been in his own tongue, and so, fortunately, they did not understand. But the contempt in his action they did recognize, and a fearful silence fell upon them all. Luger's eyes blazed, little sparks of crimson in their green. The priestess reached up, caught at O'Keefe. He seized the soft hand, caressed it. His gaze grew far away, somber. "The Shining One." He spoke low. "And now again I see the faces of those who dance with it. It is the fires of Mora come. God alone knows how from Aaron to this place. The fires of Mora." He contemplated the hushed folk before him, and then from his lips came that weirdest, most haunting of the lyric legends of Aaron, the curse of Mora. "The fretted fires of Mora blew o'er him in the night. He thrills no more to loving, nor weeps for past delight. For when those flames have bitten, both grief and joy take flight." Again Yalara tried to draw him down beside her, and once more he gripped her hand. His eyes grew fixed, he crooned, and through the sleeping silence his feet must track the tune, when the world is barred and speckled with silver of the moon. He stood, swaying, for a moment, and then, laughing, let the priestess have her way, drained again the glass. And now my heart was cold, indeed, for what hope was there left with Larry mad, wild drunk? The silence was unbroken, elfin women and dwarfs glancing furtively at each other. But now Yalara arose, face set, eyes flashing gray. "Hear you, the council, and you, Luger, and all who are here," she cried. "Now I, the priestess of the Shining One, take, as is my right, my mate. And this is he." She pointed down upon Larry. He glanced up at her. "Can't quite make out what you say, Yalara," he muttered thickly. "But say anything you like, I love your voice." I turned sick with dread. Yalara's hand stole softly upon the Irishman's curls caressingly. "You know the law, Yalara." Luger's voice was flat, deadly. "You may not mate with other than your own kind. And this man is a stranger, a barbarian, food for the Shining One." Literally, he spat the phrase. "No, not of our kind, Luger higher," Yalara answered serenely. "Lo, a son of Sia and of Sienna." "A lie," roared the Red Dwarf. "A lie. The Shining One revealed it to me," said Yalara sweetly. "And if ye believe not, Luger, go ask of the Shining One if it be not truth." There was bitter, nameless menace in those last words, and whatever their hidden message to Luger, it was potent. He stood, choking, face hell-shadowed. Marakinov leaned out again, whispered. The Red Dwarf bowed, now wholly ironically, resumed his place and his silence. And again I wondered, icy-hearted, what was the power the Russian had so to sway Luger? "What says the council?" Yalara demanded, turning to them. Only for a moment they consulted among themselves. Then the woman, whose face was a ravaged shrine of beauty, spoke. "The will of the priestess is the will of the council," she answered. Defiance died from Yalara's face. She looked down at Larry tenderly. He sat swaying, crooning. "Bid the priests come," she commanded, then turned to the silent room. "By the rights of Sia and Sienna, Yalara takes their son for her mate." And again her hand stole down possessingly, serpent soft, to the drunken head of the O'Keefe. The curtains parted widely. Through them filed, 2 by 2, 12 hooded figures clad in flowing robes of the green one sees and forest vistas of opening buds of dawning spring. Of each pair one bore clasped to breast a globe of that milky crystal in the sapphire shrine room, the other a harp, small, shaped somewhat like the ancient clarsack of the Druids. 2 by 2 they stepped upon the raised platform, placed gently upon it each their globe, and 2 by 2 crouched behind them. They formed now a star of 6 points about the pedaled dais, and, simultaneously, they drew from their faces the covering cowls. I half rose youths and maidens, these of the fair-haired. and youths and maids more beautiful than any of those I had yet seen, for upon their faces was little of that disturbing mockery to which I have been forced so often, because of the deep impression it made upon me, to refer. The ashen gold of the maiden priestess's hair was wound about their brows in shining coronals. The pale locks of the youths were clustered within circlets of translucent, glimmering gems like moonstones. And then, crystal globe alternately before and harp alternately held by youth and maid, they began to sing. What was that song? I do not know nor ever shall. Archaic, ancient beyond thought, it seemed not with the ancientness of things that for uncounted ages have been but wind-driven dust. Rather was it the ancientness of the golden youth of the world, love lilts of earth younglings, with light of newborn suns drenching them, chorals of young stars mating in space, murmurings of April gods and goddesses. A languor stole through me. The rosy lights upon the tripods began to die away, and as they faded the milky globes gleamed forth brighter, ever brighter. Yulara rose, stretched a hand to Larry, led him through the sextuple groups, and stood face to face with him in the center of their circle. The rose light died. All that immense chamber was black, save for the circle of the glowing spheres. Within this their milky radiance grew brighter. The song whispered away. A throbbing arpeggio dripped from the harps, and as the notes pulsed out, up from the globes, as though striving to follow, pulsed with them tips of moonfire cones, such as I had seen before Yulara's altar. Weirdly, caressingly, compellingly the harp notes throbbed in repeated, re-repeated theme, holding within itself the same archaic golden quality I had noted in the singing. And over the moon flame pinnacles rose higher. Yulara lifted her arms. Within her hands were clasped O'Keefe's. She raised them above their two heads and slowly drew him with her into a circling, graceful step, tendrilings delicate as the slow spiralings of twilight mist upon some still stream. As they swayed, the rippling arpeggios grew louder, and suddenly the slender pinnacles of moonfire bent, dipped, flowed to the floor, crept in a shining ring around those two and began to rise, a gleaming, glimmering, enchanted barrier rising, ever rising, hiding them. With one swift movement Yulara unbound her circlet of pale sapphires, shook loose the waves of her silken hair. It fell, a rippling, wondrous cascade, veiling both her and O'Keefe to their girdles, and now the shining coils of moonfire had crept to their knees, was circling higher. And ever despair grew deeper in my soul. What was that? I started to my feet, and all around me in the darkness I heard startled motion. From without came a blaring of trumpets, the sound of running men, loud murmurings. The tumult drew closer. I heard cries of Lakla, Lakla. Now it was at the very threshold, and within it, oddly, as though punctuating the clamor, a deep-toned, almost abysmal, booming sound, thunderously bass and reverberant. Abruptly the harpings ceased. The moonfires shuddered, fell, and began to sweep back into the crystal globes. Yulara's swaying form grew rigid, every atom of it listening. She threw aside the veiling cloud of hair, and in the gleam of the last retreating spirals her face glared out like some old Greek mask of tragedy. The sweet lips that even at their sweetest could never lose their delicate cruelty had no sweetness now. They were drawn into a square inhuman as that of the Medusa. In her eyes were the fires of the pit, and her hair seemed to writhe like the serpent locks of that Gorgon whose mouth she had borrowed. All her beauty was transformed into a nameless thing, hideous, inhuman, blasting. If this was the true soul of Yulara springing to her face, then, I thought, God help us in very deed. I rested my gaze away to O'Keefe. All drunkenness gone, himself again, he was staring down at her, and in his eyes were loathing and horror unutterable. So they stood and the light fled. Only for a moment did the darkness hold. With lightning swiftness the blackness that was the chamber's other wall vanished. Through a portal opened between gray screens, the silver sparkling radiance poured, and through the portal marched, 2 by 2, incredible, nightmare figures, frogmen, giants, taller by nearly a yard than even tall O'Keefe. Their enormous saucer eyes were irised by wide bands of green flecked red, in which the phosphorescence flickered. Their long muzzles, lips half open in monstrous grin, held rows of glistening, slender, lancet-sharp fangs. Over the glaring eyes arose a horny helmet, a carapace of black and orange scales, studded with foot-long lance-headed horns. They lined themselves like soldiers on each side of the wide table aisle, and now I could see that their horny armor-covered shoulders and backs ran across the chest in a knobbed cuirass, and at wrists and heels jutted out into curved, murderous spurs. The webbed hands and feet ended in yellow, spade-shaped claws. They carried spears, 10 feet, at least, in length, the heads of which were pointed cones, glistening with that same covering, from whose touch of swift decay I had so narrowly saved Raider. They were grotesque, yes, more grotesque than anything I had ever seen or dreamed, and they were terrible. And then, quietly, through their ranks came a girl. Behind her, enormous pouch at his throat swelling in and out menacingly. In one paw a tree-like, spike-studded mace, a frogman, huger than any of the others, guarding. But of him I caught but a fleeting, involuntary impression. All my gaze was for her. For it was she who had pointed out to us the way from the peril of the dweller's lair on Nantoch. And as I looked at her, I marveled that ever could I have thought the priestess more beautiful. Into the eyes of O'Keefe rushed joy and an utter abasement of shame. And from all about came murmurs edged with anger, half incredulous, tinged with fear. Lachla, Lachla, the handmaiden. She halted close beside me. From firm little chin to dainty buskined feet, she was swathed in the soft robes of dull, almost coppery hue. The left arm was hidden, the right free and gloved. Wound tight about it was one of the vines of the sculptured wall and of Luger's circled signet ring. Thick, of vivid green, its 5 tendrils ran between her fingers, stretching out 5 flowered heads that gleamed like blossoms cut from gigantic, glowing rubies. So she stood contemplating Yulara. Then, drawn perhaps by my gaze, she dropped her eyes upon me, golden, translucent, with tiny flecks of amber in their orid irises. The soul that looked through them was as far removed from that flaming out of the priestess as zenith is above nadir. I noted the low, broad brow, the proud little nose, the tender mouth, and the soft sunlight glow that seemed to transfuse the delicate skin. And suddenly in the eyes dawned a smile sweet, friendly, a touch of roguishness, profoundly reassuring in its all-humanness. I felt my heart expand as though freed from fetters, a recrudescence of confidence in the essential reality of things, as though in nightmare the struggling consciousness should glimpse some familiar face and know the terrors with which it strove were but dreams. And involuntarily I smiled back at her. She raised her head and looked again at Yulara, contempt and a certain curiosity in her gaze. At O'Keefe, and through the softened eyes drifted swiftly a shadow of sorrow, and on its fleeting wings deepest interest, and hovering over that a naive approval as reassuringly human as had been her smile. She spoke, and her voice, deep timbred, liquid gold as was Yulara's all silver, was subtly the synthesis of all the golden glowing beauty of her. "The Silent Ones have sent me, O Yulara," she said, "and this is their command to you, that you deliver to me to bring before them 3 of the 4 strangers who have found their way here. For him there who plots with Luger," she pointed at Marakanoff, and I saw Yulara start, "they have no need. Into his heart the Silent Ones have looked, and Luger, and you may keep him, Yulara." There was honeyed venom in the last words. Yulara was herself now. Only the edge of shrillness on her voice revealed her wrath as she answered. "And whence have the Silent Ones gained power to command, _Choya_?" This last, I knew, was a very vulgar word. I had heard Raider use it in a moment of anger to one of the serving maids, and it meant, approximately, kitchen girl, scullion. Beneath the insult and the acid disdain, the blood rushed up under Lachla's ambered ivory skin. "Yulara," her voice was low, "of no use is it to question me. I am but the messenger of the Silent Ones. And one thing only am I bidden to ask you: do you deliver to me the 3 strangers?" Luger was on his feet. Eagerness, sardonic delight, sinister anticipation thrilling from him, and my same glance showed Marakanoff, crouched, biting his fingernails, glaring at the golden girl. "No, Yalara spat the word. No. Now by Thanaroa, and by the Shining One, no. Her eyes blazed, her nostrils were wide. In her fair throat a little pulse beat angrily. You, Lakla, take you my message to the Silent Ones. Say to them that I keep this man, she pointed to Larry, because he is mine. Say to them that I keep the yellow-haired one in him. She pointed to me, because it pleases me. Tell them that upon their mouths I place my foot, so. She stamped upon the dais viciously, and that in their faces I spit. And her action was hideously snake-like. And say last to them, you handmaiden, that if _you_ they dare send to Yalara again, she will feed _you_ to the Shining One. Now go. The handmaiden's face was white. Not unforeseen by the three was this, Yalara, she replied. And did you speak as you have spoken, then was I bidden to say this to you. Her voice deepened. 3_tal_ have you to take counsel, Yalara. And at the end of that time these things must you have determined either to do or not to do. First, send the strangers to the Silent Ones. Second, give up, you and Luger and all of you, that dream you have of conquest of the world without. And third, forswear the Shining One. And if you do not one and all these things, then are you done, your cup of life broken, your wine of life spilled. Yeah, Yalara, for you and the Shining One, Luger and the 9 and all those here and their kind shall pass. This say the Silent Ones. Surely shall all of ye pass, and be as though never had ye been. Now a gasp of rage and fear arose from all those around me, but the priestess threw back her head and laughed loud and long. Into the silver sweet chiming of her laughter clashed that of Lugaran. After a little the nobles took it up, till the whole chamber echoed with their mirth. O'Keefe, lips tightening, moved toward the handmaiden, and almost imperceptibly, but peremptorily, she waved him back. Those are great words indeed. Choice, shrilled Yalara at last. And again Lakla winced beneath the word. Lo, for _Leia_ upon _Leia_ the Shining One has been freed from the three, and for _Leia_ upon _Leia_ they have sat helpless, rotting. Now I ask you again, whence comes their power to lay their will upon me? And whence comes their strength to wrestle with the Shining One and the beloved of the Shining One? And again she laughed, and again Luger and all the fair-haired joined in her laughter. Into the eyes of Lakla I saw creep a doubt, a wavering, as though deep within her the foundations of her own belief were none too firm. She hesitated, turning upon O'Keefe gaze in which rested more than suggestion of appeal. And Yalara saw, too, for she flushed with triumph, stretched a finger toward the handmaiden. Look, she cried. Look. Why, even _she_ does not believe. Her voice grew silk of silver, merciless, cruel. Now am I minded to send another answer to the Silent Ones. Yeah, but not by _you_ Lakla, by these. She pointed to the frogmen, and, swift as light, her hand darted into her bosom, bringing forth the little shining cone of death. But before she could level it, the golden girl had released that hidden left arm and thrown over her face a fold of the metallic swathings. Swifter than Yalara, she raised the arm that held the vine, and now I knew this was no inert blossoming thing. It was alive. It writhed down her arm, and its 5 rube-scent flower heads thrust out toward the priestess, vibrating, quivering, held in leash only by the light touch of the handmaiden at its very end. From the swelling throat pouch of the monster behind her came a succession of the reverberant boomings. The frogmen wheeled, raised their lances, leveled them at the throng. Around the reaching ruby flowers a faint red mist swiftly grew. The silver cone dropped from Yolara's rigid fingers. Her eyes grew stark with horror. All her unearthly loveliness fled from her. She stood pale-lipped. The handmaiden dropped the protecting veil, and now it was she who laughed. It would seem, then, Yalara, that there is a thing of the Silent Ones ye fear, she said. While the kiss of the Yekta I promise you in return for the embrace of your Shining One. She looked at Larry, long, searchingly, and suddenly again with all that effect of sunlight bursting into dark places, her smile shone upon him. She nodded, half gaily, looked down upon me, the little merry light dancing in her eyes, waved her hand to me. She spoke to the giant frogman. He wheeled behind her as she turned, facing the priestess, club upraised, fangs glistening. His troop moved not a jot, spears held high. Lakla began to pass slowly almost, I thought, tauntingly, and as she reached the portal Larry leaped from the dais. Alana, he cried. You'll not be leaving me just when I've found you. In his excitement, he spoke in his own tongue, the velvet brogue appealing. Lakla turned, contemplated O'Keefe, hesitant, unquestionably longingly, irresistibly like a child making up her mind whether she dared or dared not take a delectable something offered her. I go with you, said O'Keefe, this time in her own speech. Come on, Doc. He reached out a hand to me. But now Yulara spoke. Life and beauty had flowed back into her face, and in the purple eyes all her hosts of devils were gathered. Do you forget what I promised you before Sia and Sienna? And do you think that you can leave me as though I were A_Choi_her? She pointed to Lakla. Do you? Now, listen, Yulara. Larry interrupted almost plaintively. No promise has passed from me to you, and why would you hold me? He passed unconsciously into English. Be a good sport, Yulara, he urged. You have got a very devil of a temper, you know, and so have I. And we'd be really awfully uncomfortable together. And why don't you get rid of that devilish pet of yours, and be good? She looked at him, puzzled. Marakinov leaned over, translated to Luger. The red dwarf smiled maliciously, drew near the priestess, whispered to her what was without doubt as near as he could come in the Murian to Larry's own very colloquial phrases. Yulara's lips writhed. Hear me, Lakla, she cried. Now would I not let you take this man from me were I to dwell 10,000_Leia_ in the agony of the _Fiectas_ kiss. This I swear to you by Thanaroa, by my heart, and by my strength, and may my strength wither, my heart rot in my breast, and Thanaroa forget me if I do. Listen, Yulara, began O'Keefe again. Be silent, you. It was almost a shriek, and her hand again sought in her breast for the cone of rhythmic death. Luger touched her arm, whispered again. The glint of guile shone in her eyes. She laughed softly, relaxed. The silent ones, Lakla, bade you say that they allowed me 3_Tal_ to decide, she said suavely. Go now in peace, Lakla, and say that Yulara has heard, and that for the 3_Tal_ they allow her, she will take counsel. The handmaiden hesitated. The silent ones have said it, she answered at last. Stay you here, strangers. The long lashes drooped as her eyes met O'Keefe's, and a hint of blush was in her cheeks. Stay you here, strangers, till then. But, Yulara, see you on that heart and strength you have sworn by that they come to no harm else that which you have invoked shall come upon you swiftly indeed, and that I promise you, she added. Their eyes met, clashed, burned into each other black flame from Abaddon and golden flame from paradise. Remember, said Lakla, and passed through the portal. The gigantic frogman boomed a thunderous note of command. His grotesque guards turned and slowly followed their mistress, and last of all passed out the monster with the mace.